Da-da-da-da-da. Yo, welcome to DevKami, episode 206. Is this the first one this year or the second one? I think it's the second one.
Apparently, according to our website, there was a
Oh,
204 on the 15th, but there was no 205. So I don't know what
yeah,
happened to
205
205.
is this year. Correct. It's like I think it's just before Chinese New Year, I think. So that being
Mhm.
said, welcome. And my name is Swimming. I
And
still
I
need to
am
fix my mic.
Tristan,
And we had
and I have my mic fixed.
our long term guest, Sean. And Chi Leong is busy as usual. Story of our life. So that being said, let's start with our bus corner. Let's start with event. I do not know what event is happening. Actually, I know one. PyCon is happening in August.
This is like
Uh,
quite far away. Are you selling
correct.
tickets, or is this
No,
like free admission?
just an announcement for now.
Mm.
So they're planning a few things and all that.
Are you getting Guido again? I thought Guido was
No, I
this
don't
year.
think so because I don't think it's easy to get people to fly in anywhere because one, we are not the main show, which actually will be a topic we'll be talking about in a way because we have some big product announcement here. But as usual, Malaysia is really not. Did I look it correctly? I am. Okay, so Malaysia is as usual not the big show in a way, unlike Singapore for various reasons, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so it's hard to get big name. It's easier if somebody opt to come here because Malaysia is what you would say exotic, so to say. Know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So people may come. So I'm going to share this tab first. Event
Digital
page.
nomad pass.
Yeah, correct. But big name Python developers do not pass by here all the time. But that being said, we do have previously, for example, we used to have a Django contributor actually run a local company here, or rather a
Mm-hmm.
company office here, and it turns out he passed away soon after. Very cool guy. Then we have a few, but not a lot. So me, I'm a minor person by comparison. Yes, I'm a fellow in Python Software Foundation, but by comparison, I'm not a lot. So we have nothing happening until we literally have nothing happening until 18 actually. So that's like the week after next week. So maybe I'm going to organize this one day, I promise. So that being
Mm-hmm.
said, let's go to the news. Share this tab. Okay, so the first one I'll talk about is actually I'm going to stop sharing. I'm going to share full screen instead, and the reason is I have a lot of tab. A window. Cool. So first one is SQL Alchemy 2.0 is out. This one is interesting for me because I actually use it. SQL Alchemy is a ORM that do not depends. That is not tied to any web framework. So, and this is a big one in a way that this is actually an API change. So let's go to official change log instead. I
So
do
hence
not
the major version change, right?
correct. So for example, previously they have a thing called let's go here. So they previously had a thing called query object, unified tutorial, query object. So you use a query, then you try to. I'm going to show you the API instead. Connectivity
Mm-hmm.
engine, working with transaction. Uh, okay, first thing is previously so this is the basic way. This is not what I want to show you about. You can one thing about SQL Alchemy, you need to know that ORM is just one of the toolkit. You can do SQL. You can do SQL. The connection is a context manager, meaning when you use it, it automatically garbage collected. You can run SQL. It's a toolkit on its own. SQL Alchemy are not just an ORM. Okay, ORM is just one of the abstraction layer to make life easy. So of course you can just simply execute things as you need it. But this is old. This is very old. This is not what I want. This is what I want about this one. So please tell me. Okay, I'm trying to find that there's a good document. SQL Alchemy had very good documentation, except I need to find it. Grand Unified. Okay, migrating to 2.0. Here is the one. So, and this one. And I also find this very interesting for any language for many reasons. Uh, first one is actually connection. Not do I care about session. Previously, a session is their own object. So you change a session dot query, then do your database query. Not anymore. It's now a session. Now it's what we call a context manager, meaning after you do an operation, you commit, then outside the read block is disconnected. This way, the connection is automatically cleaned up. You don't have to think about. You can assume that the database connection is cleaned up and get the job done. So you can assume that this session is one transaction, so to say. So it's interesting. Given that, it's also interesting that they choose to use the word session instead of transaction, because next thing I want to show you is
Oh, because
okay.
transaction
So
is a concept in SQL. If you say transaction, you know you can roll back in the middle and everything is fine.
correct,
But
correct,
I'm
correct,
guessing in a session you don't have to be in a transaction.
correct. You don't have to, because you can, as long you did not commit, it's not committed, so to say. This is lesser very useful for us, but not very clear for other. So there is a new way to actually create a base class. Not very interesting for us users, but not for general. So say. The second thing I want to care about is the transaction auto. Okay, so your transaction is not auto commit now, which is very good. Okay, which is a good thing, because sometimes it's better to be explicit to actually commit data. I actually got beaten that make the wrong assumption, but having this as a safety is a good thing to us. Then finally, one choice, metadata, don't care, don't care, don't care. What I care about is the ORM. The ORM part is very interesting because the ORM part is transaction, auto connect, ORM configuration. ORM configuration, not this one. You guys suck. Okay, you are sucks in documentation. I'm so sorry. Yeah. Okay, so first one, everything can be a select now. So instead of a query object, you actually select object, the database object, so to say, the table, where with column. So insert table, you can assume the object and returning. So in this way, when you query for a query using your ORM, it's more SQL like. So I know it's a bit of a taste thing. Okay, it's a bit of a taste, but I find it's very interesting because it looked clearer to me as a user. So so this is equal to select user ID and username from user. So it's not full SQL, but it's closer when it comes to the convention, which I think is very interesting. Then dot one. So this is limit one. So you still see the ORM element, but they actually unify the language with SQL like language. You see, you see that? So see here, right? So address is a table object, so to
Yeah,
say.
lots of influence from the Rails active record. Well, not
Correct,
really.
correct.
Uh, it's the DSL basically is there.
Correct. So I find this very interesting. They choose to make it over uh, functional over the another new language, which Python don't really have, but arguably, but I get it. So this is actually very cool. So yeah, I'm using this right now. I find the abstraction makes sense. You do not work on the object level now. And this is a good thing, because if you do things like update multiple, it's previously it's not easy to do. Okay, it's not very easy to do because you have to look through an object, then you have assume that then they may save one by one. It's not very good. What you can do is like update. You can do a bulk update now using the update function. So it's a unified API, and you can do SQL-like function, which is very here you are bulk update. So this is very cool. Ta-da-da. So update is just a function on top of the table, but this is actually an update table set value equals
But
where,
that's quite
right?
surprising. You would expect an ORM to have already support for bulk update. What took them so long
Correct.
for this?
Huh?
It's like JavaScript
Previously,
taking until 2016 to get the power operator in the language.
Django
So it's
have it.
taking a long time.
Django have it. Actually, I believe that. Remember, I tell you that SQL Alchemy is not an ORM, so to say. They also had
Mhm.
the bare database feature.
Yeah.
So I
So people
probably
just do the
believe that
bare the SQL statement.
correct. I believe the designer chose that until recently, but I do not know for sure. I did not involve with the discussion,
Mm.
but it probably because they do not have a good abstraction because this style, the SQL style function, is very new in SQL Alchemy. It's not there in the previous object because previously you are working one object at a time. So it's a very different abstraction. So that
I'm
being said,
curious with regard to
uh-huh.
like microcontrollers. Like, is there any reason why you would have an SQL database in a microcontroller or running in something like in that kind of situation?
Okay, you're
Or how
talking
do you actually
about
manage data?
wait. Okay, so first thing, I want to throw this thing away first. SQL Alchemy is used for major Python application. So that's one done. Okay.
Yeah, that's SQL
Okay.
Alchemy. I'm talking about SQL in general because we're in SQL
Okay.
here,
SQL
and
inject.
because Sean
There
is here,
is a
so I
strong
wanted
use.
to ask
Okay.
for like
I'm going
his.
to add one thing before Sean continue. The story of SQL Alchemy, SQLite, is actually the use of SQL database on the warship,
Mhm.
right? Uh, yes, it's not a microcontroller, but those are Windows NT machine probably
Well, yeah,
on the
so that's
warship that
still
need
a
to
full
deliver.
blown computer for doing reporting, right? Like, but I'm more interested in like how do you
It's not
manage data?
reporting. It's not reporting. It's for state management of certain pipes
Mm.
of a warship, certain component of the warship. It's a decision making system, not a reporting system.
Mhm.
So
So
I
yeah,
think what
that
Tristan
is
was trying to
go
say
on.
that I think what Tristan was trying to say is those are still big machines lah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Big systems.
correct.
They are not embedded systems, right? Not small.
How will you do like those kinds of operations on a data structure, but on a smaller thing? But would you use SQL because you need to parse a language basically on that tiny chip, right? Like, how would you deal with that?
And the short answer would be a very non-exciting
Hmm.
fact that we don't use SQL.
Yeah,
Right? At a very low level, it would not make any sense.
yeah.
Right. So especially like you said, if you want to use SQL, you basically need to have an SQL engine in there in the
Hmm.
first place. That is going to take up how much memory space, just to do that.
Mhm.
So there isn't this kind of thing in
Yep.
the low level embedded systems world. Um, and the flip side to that is there isn't that much data to play around
Yep.
or manipulate with anymore.
Well, but for example, it's like things like I squared C, where you send like basically a 2 byte key, and then you have a procedure that runs. So you basically just map that to another thing in the data structure in the code itself. You don't
Yeah,
manage the data
the
anymore.
Yeah.
most yeah, there's definitely no managing of data. There isn't that
Mm.
much data to deal with in the first
I
place,
see.
Yeah,
Mhm.
correct.
right? So whatever you need, the most complex thing is probably just lookup table.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's just an array.
Chance.
Thing.
So
Or
chances you look at the yeah. Finish first.
yeah, just a lookup table or some sort of associative table. That's
Correct.
pretty much
Because
as
if we look at things like I squared C, right, the addressing is actually a table. It's a tables and a bytes. These bytes correspond to
Yeah.
this value. This is how I squared C works actually. So you and believe it or not, your 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 small microcontroller nowadays can stuff a hash table very easily.
Mhm.
It's not too big actually. and the report you want SQL for reporting for that kind of use case, meaning you inject data, you use the devices, the edge devices, so to say, to send data over somewhere and inject it to a data collector. So the collector could be a database.
That,
We did
that
that
is
for we did that.
that is one way to do it.
Yeah,
In the rare instances where you are building something that needs to collect more data,
yeah.
right? Then basically, again, it'll be very very simple. You
Mhm.
basically the most common method is just basically to write it to a file,
Yeah.
And
right?
you process it later, do a
Yeah,
batch processing afterwards.
just write it to a file or dump it into some flash storage
Correct.
like that. That's it. You
So
don't
you
really
have someone collect the SD cards afterwards at the end of the day and then replace it.
yeah, basically.
Yeah.
Or of course, like what you
Or
mentioned to get at that is nowadays with IoT you got internet, right? So
Yeah.
just
yeah,
dump everything to the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Or what NASA would do is deep space network exists for a reason. So the Mars rover probably had a structured file and just send it in bulk one by one, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Periodically
So
batch job, just
correct.
copying it.
So I mean,
Yeah.
I do not know whether the Mars rover had SQLite on it. Would that be interesting, right? So yeah.
Maybe.
Okay, let's move on to the next thing. Next news. We had this is not the juicy news, by the way. This is not the juicy thing I want to talk about. It's a damn interesting thing for me, but it's not the juicy thing. The next juicy thing is this one. I
Ah,
know some interesting for some of us that have to work in
AWS.
Mm-hmm.
more like restricted environment because uh, I do not know the status of Bank Negara and cloud service, the data locality thing, right? So I do not know the status of that, but a lot of that also means that they want to limit the data locally, which currently as of now there's only two provider, Azure and Ali Cloud. So Amazon going in, but what is interesting here is because uh, is it that big of an impact for us? That's the question I want to know. What do you guys think?
Well, I think it will only impact people who are already AWS users. Because
Yeah,
if you are
but
already on TCP, for example, you are not going to switch for this reason. Right?
But
yeah, but Mhm.
not just users, but more like also for people whose audience is primarily Malaysia, because get you don't need to pay interconnect to somewhere
Correct,
else if you're really bare
correct,
bones or you're managing like those things, right? So
correct.
the ping times are smaller. Like for example, if you're running a cash service, or like let's say, yeah, your Lazada, let's say, right, and you have your Lazada
Mhm.
Malaysia shop, and you want to cache all of the images and all of the pages in your store, then it's an immediate lookup because it's very close, it's local. It's not.
I tried it with when
Not
AliCloud
really.
first launched. I tested it
Ah,
Yeah.
out, AliCloud, and I found it was so slow. I might as well just host everything
hmm.
in Singapore.
Oh, that's
Singapore was
interesting.
faster than AliCloud in Malaysia. Yes.
How is
Correct.
Singapore doing a round trip to Singapore faster than?
It's because there is a fiber optic for actually the fiber optic do not connect from Johor, by the way, they connect from Malacca or something. It's a C cable. It's a C fiber optic cable that connect directly there.
Hmm.
So it's not too bad. With the speed of light, it's really fast, really. So
Well,
and as a result, we don't most business cases here do not have a strong case to use AWS because Singapore is close enough, right? We do
yeah, I would say
it's
Singapore
not
is close enough.
second, right? So the only reason then is you have this restricted environment that want the data to be hosted locally, and that's the only reason really.
Well, that doesn't
Because
like AWS setting up shop in Malaysia just for that. I don't know if they would
yeah, I don't
even
understand, which is
ship
why I don't get it
packets.
because previously they do it for Indonesia. Indonesia is had a very clear case. Indonesia had a big population, so if you concentrate your infrastructure there, it help you get the money from there, and more importantly, you concentrate the traffic there before you have to move, distribute it across the world and all that, right? So that is one
Not,
reason why you
not
have
just
that
that,
in
it's because
Indonesia.
Indonesia is it's a lots of islands, and so the interconnect
Correct.
there is going to be quite difficult. And like for example, in Malaysia,
Yeah.
you have lots of terrestrial
Correct.
connections. You just have like a big pipe, and then you distribute.
Yes.
Distribution is very easy. So
Correct. Then
having
you have
AWS there is makes much more sense.
correct. And Singapore, because it's Singapore, they already invest the money, that try to do a lot of stuff to make things right for the first place. So Malaysia, why? I do not know yet. And to be honest, I don't understand.
Maybe it's a backup, like redundancy for the
Correct.
Singapore servers.
Yes, but correct. But you want to turn this into a region in AWS. Um, okay, maybe it makes sense. But when you do a multi-zone replicas, you actually do it by subnets, meaning different areas. So it only makes sense if Malaysia is part of the subnet for AP Southeast One, which is Singapore region, right? That's the
Well,
only
I guess
where
it
it
would
makes
be,
sense.
right? I mean, you're
No, this is what they promise here is what they promise here is actually a separate region. So you're not doing a
well,
multi
that's even
setup.
better, right? Like that's even
It's
better if
not.
it's an availability zone that's separate from Singapore. Then that's a good for redundancy. If
Yeah, but
Singapore goes
availability
down, it
is
doesn't take Malaysia down as well.
correct. But you do not set up different region. You do not set up. You can, but they're going to cost you lah. And as a
Yeah, I
result,
mean
unless you really
that's the
need it,
cost of redundancy, of course.
right? But it's not a default setup that is easy to use by default lah. But maybe some of these does make sense to have a multi-region. StarHub, maybe it makes sense. Uh, then for the rest, I do not know. E-commerce makes sense. Grab makes sense, but Grab already in Singapore, so maybe they're going to replicate one down here just because. So yeah, this will be interesting to see. I just don't. I unless the provider, the data center providers up ourselves so well in this country, or we have more option. That's the only way I can think. That's the only way I think that this is valuable for everyone. No, it's valuable for us now in short term, but it's just very weird as an option, right? So yeah, so that's that. So anything to
Especially,
add? If not, I'm going. Go on, Sean.
but I was just about to say like the only people who are going to use this probably are the people who you already see the list of names there, right? These are the
Yeah, correct.
big players. But then the question becomes, why would they move away from?
Yeah.
I assume they are presumably in Singapore at the moment, right? So
No,
okay, wherever
I
they are at
doubt
the moment,
it. Correct,
right?
correct.
But why would they move away if it already works there? Because as we all know,
Uh-huh.
the effort to move it is going to be huge, right?
Okay.
So
I have a suspect here. If you look at it, it's Cybersecurity Malaysia, Department of Statistics. Now, these guys are governments. I do not believe they are fully on the cloud of any existing vendor yet. Meaning, they are. I do not see vendors. They are using the vendors for, let's say, Azure. I do not know if they have a setup in Azure because they're Malaysian government, or Alibaba, especially. I do not know whether they have that. Because we know that the Malaysian government do pay for data centers, right? They do pay for that PM, so it's an economic thing. So that happens. We know that. But if this is the case, if these guys do are moving from the data center to a cloud, then it makes a lot of sense because the Malaysian government also no stranger of outsourcing as well.
mm,
Then if that's the case, then maybe they're waiting for the biggest player to come in and move over to that instead. So that probably the only reason really. So and for AWS, they get a backup region if anything happen because Malaysia are very central everything else.
mm.
So those are
What's
bonus.
what's this date by 2037?
Oh,
That's
the region is not available yet.
yeah,
It's
seven.
not
That's 14 years. So that's 14 years of investment.
No. So the region probably come earlier, but the 14 years are for investing on infrastructure, people, and all that. So they're throwing money for people to hire people to maintain the data centers infrastructure and whatnot, and also supposedly train people along the way.
No, I'm
Because you
just like
can't just set up a
doing
data
a
center, you're talking about
quick
people as well.
calculation because it's 14 years, or let's say 28, so
Yes,
that's like 2 billion per year.
correct.
Well,
So
on
I do not know where
average.
it goes.
Mm.
So which is why I find it interesting as well, right? 2 billion a year. It's not. It's not just for. It's just not just for that because you already have to pay people and all that. So there's that. So I do not know. Given that they are private company, we do not know the breakdown for sure. And also, this is a promise. This is a promise. This is not something you budgeted like the government.
I'll believe it when we see the things up lah. When you
Correct.
can actually
Correct.
start
By
launching.
in a decade, are we still in
Yeah,
in
we talk about
software?
this in 5 years times and still like they're still not here yet.
Correct. They're not here yet, actually. It's not that they can't, because they already have the capability, like Fargate and all that. That allows you to install local infrastructure. They can do that, so not a problem.
But
Whether they're here for real, that's not
you know how much has changed in the last 10 years, right? Just imagine 2010 and now,
correct.
like things have changed.
Correct.
So from now until that it's actually operational, things will change.
Correct.
No more cloud. Cloud will be out of
Mm.
cloud will be grandpa's technology by then.
Mm-hmm.
Could be like the Sun microsystem dream of your computer is the network. I forgot. Is it your computer is the
Yeah,
network or
the
whatever?
computer and the network is the computer.
The network is the
that's the
computer. That
All
might
of
have
us have
been
implanted machines
yeah.
inside our brains. Yeah.
yeah.
Mhm.
So I'm going to go to the next thing. This is actually a bit of a sad story. Professor Lampo actually passed away. Actually, 2 months back, I believe. He is actually a pioneer in computer science. And also he's in Israel, so there's that. He's a pioneer. So he's the reason why you have Lampo zip algorithm and all that. So yep, RP to
He's
him. No,
one of the people who give this give this impression that computer science and software development you need a
correct,
mathematics degree
correct.
because
So it's
well
called Lampo zip algorithm. Let me show
they
you.
do contribute a lot, but most of the
Yeah,
things that we do right now are plumbing instead of
correct,
breakthrough innovation.
correct. So this algorithm is actually by him among a few people, and it's a standard algorithm in many places. So
Yeah, so
yeah,
he that encoding is on the GIF format, right?
correct.
There are many variants of it, but
Correct. There's an adoption rate, but it's a
Yeah,
very
there you go.
well-known
So
paper
it does say it on GIF.
in GIF. Correct. So yeah, rest in peace, lah. But it's good that you know the pioneer just because. I mean, so I'm going to move on. Explain, analyze. Okay, I do not know what to put. Why I put this? I put this here because it's one of those skill that sometimes you need somebody to point to you to know that this is useful, because otherwise I want to put this here because apparently not enough people know, and I understand that. I really understand that. Uh, so because if your team don't have people that work with in SQL long enough, you probably never heard of explain analyze for a long time. And also as a result, the default solution is almost every instance and all that. So I
Yeah.
put it here so that people will know this. Okay.
But most of the
And
time, people
yeah,
who use the framework follow the best practices, and so it is quite rare that you would use explain analyze because most of the best practices are met, right? And it's only that
yeah,
performance issue that you're doing that okay now we have to drill down to the actual SQL statement that's being generated by your ORM. Why is this happening? And then
correct.
you think about it, okay, you're doing too many calls on this thing. Maybe you need to
Yes.
consolidate whatever, right? But
So
that's the reason why a lot of people don't really reach for this because most of the time the problem is a logic
yes.
problem on software, not on the actual statement. Of course, it's
correct,
a different
but
question when you hand roll your own statements. Then you're
yes,
throwing away all of the best practices and all of the wisdom from that framework because you thought you could.
yeah, yeah, but sometimes I don't know. Okay, put it this way. I'm not saying that ORM sucks. It works like 80% of the time, 90% of the time it works well until you use things very naively, right? So an example is, let's say you do a naive in function in the ORM without caring about the number of data. You just do one query that get a lot of result in one side in the 10,000s. Then you take the same result and put it as a parameter for a filter function for Rails, for example. Rails will happily run it for you, will happily generate the query for you. All right. Uh, but the problem is nobody actually and Rails. Okay, so different query. First query, select all from a task. Okay, now you get an ID of 10,000. You got 10,000 ID from your query. Okay, 10,000 ID from your query. Now you put it on the second query, select all where the task ID is in, right? Is in, then now they happily accept the 10,000 query. Now, as a result, the query is not optimized at all. Nothing is optimized, things are slow, and one query takes 7 seconds to run, right? Uh, it is happening in production right now. I just, even I add an index, it does not help that. The only reason why it's not a problem now is because there's not as many query that,
Yeah,
not
and
as
that
many views
which
that
is
can
also the
call that.
reason why it was never caught until now. Is because even in development and in
No,
testing, you
it's
never
called
get that
yeah.
many uh, items, right? These are problems that you only realize if you've seen them before or you actually have enough of
Uh,
like data that it matters for this
yes.
kind of performance.
Correct. So in this case, it's really the data size problem, except it's a data size problem that is ridiculously small. So that's that.
Mm.
So either way, there is extracting for these tools in a way. I mean, I'm not saying that the framework is
Yeah,
the framework can be
no, no.
sucked, but the framework is naive. So you do the
The
naive
framework
thing.
does all of the things that it can do automatically, but it's
Yeah.
still up to the person to use them properly. If you don't use the tool properly, then it can't do anything else, right? It
Yes.
tries to prevent
Just
like foot guns, but you can still do it.
just use the ORM, and if the requirement is requires something more complicated, change the requirement.
Hmm.
Yeah. But sometimes it's the I don't know. I actually have these. Uh, it's experience. It's less of this, right? Uh, in fact, sometimes you write code is properly, you don't even face this problem. But that's another story altogether. But I want to share. This thing is very cool also because they actually show
Yeah,
tools that you can use to analyze these two. The output is
the
actually very
output.
useful.
Yeah. So yeah, so this is the
Correct.
thing. So and as a segue to that, so this is the second part of what I'm saying. So you have
Yeah.
those ORMs, you have best practices. When you do realize you need like manual execution, this is when you also need. This is your complement. You need to make sure that you know how to analyze the output as well. You can't just say, "Oh, I know how to use SQL, and then I'm just going to do that." You need to
Yes,
know the
but
other side of this, and that's where all of these SQL alchemy and sorry, SQL analyze and all of
yeah,
the tools that visualize the output of that command comes in.
yes, but in this case, it's not a custom SQL query. It's a ORM generated query. That's the
Mm.
slow part. That's the very slow one. So, and it's not. It's slow.
Well, you
Sometimes
know,
it's
a lot of companies have mentioned that maybe SQL is not the correct database abstract. Sorry, yeah, the object
so
abstraction here. Maybe you need something
okay,
else. That I mean, the
correct,
reasons why all of these kinds of different kinds of databases are there is because they can enhance or become more efficient in certain types of collecting of data, right? SQL is great for general report. Like you don't know what you want, and so that's why you have a query language. You ask, and then you
correct.
ask them to like capture data and then and do this collection and all of these things. But if you already know what you want and it's just going to be done over and over again, then a more efficient data structure might be what you need.
Yeah, then now you have to teach them about data structure now, because often the default data structure that you have is a database. Okay, it's a
Mhm.
database.
It's the
So
most generic, so that's why it is the default. Like
yeah, so
it can do 80% of the job well
so
enough.
let's say correct, but let's say you use things like MongoDB. All right, MongoDB. Now you have to shifting the data structure operation from the database engine to your code, right? The reason is SQL, MongoDB. Okay, a few years when I use it, the query engine is not really that
Yeah, so
good.
if you're
So
doing queries on MongoDB, I think you're doing it. You're
right,
missing the
right,
point.
Yes.
right.
If
But
you're doing
yet,
joins
yeah,
across documents, I think you're missing the point of
yeah.
MongoDB.
Okay, right. That doesn't work. Now, then the next option is you're going to use DynamoDB. Now, DynamoDB, let's say you do everything denormalize and all that. Yes. Yes,
Just use
Sean.
the
What?
in-memory data structure stuff, everything in
Yeah,
there.
that works too.
Yeah, except now people will your okay. In theory, it will work, because your okay. I'm going to use AWS example. AWS they actually in AWS you get a 2 GB by default, 4 GB. Then maybe work. I don't know, right? Also, now you need to think about some other issue as well. How many of your more junior engineers actually know about data structures?
Well,
As in
that's a separate
can
issue. That's a separate
yeah.
issue.
Mhm.
So
If
I'm
they
not
can
even
learn
asking
SQL,
implementation.
if they can learn
I'm
SQL, I'm pretty sure they can learn data structures.
Mhm.
yes, but
It's
or everything or you put everything as a array, then they do a loop through it without thinking of that. Now you have another problem.
I mean,
So
if you have someone going through an array, it's the same issue as someone doing a select all and then trying to filter in memory the
yeah,
objects that you get from SQL, right? It's the same, well,
yeah.
not exactly the same issue, but the same source of like not understanding
yes,
how to optimize an operation.
correct. So it's shifting problem. It's shifting the problem to another place. That's what I'm trying to
Mhm.
say.
No, like
Yeah.
So
it's the right tool for the right job, right? Like for example, if you're in an embedded system, there is no SQL.
no,
Yeah.
So
you're
if
not
you
going to
need,
get that, right?
yeah, so if you need to have certain kind of data structures that are more complicated,
Yeah,
it's all gonna have to be, non-SQL anyway. So you have to
correct,
figure
correct.
out the solution for it.
Well,
So
Yes.
sorry.
sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah, so
well,
then
I was just going to say that because mostly in microcontrollers, you don't change a lot of things, right? So that's why you can freeze those data structures because you query them
Mm-hmm.
over and over again. Yeah. Sorry, Sean, you were saying something?
no, that's exactly it. Right. So but then it right tool for the right job, lah, right? So if you've got structures that need to always be changed, right, then extend it, right?
Yeah.
SQL or Excel. Just ask your business analyst. Learn how to do pivot tables. Don't make us program those visualizations. Just do it in Excel. Do a pivot table. That's the same answer as you
Yeah.
can that we're
Okay,
doing. You know.
I have this story about Excel. Okay, this is actually a public knowledge now. So in Sina project, when we actually have access to the construction industry data set, it's a modest size data set, 30,000 K, not a lot really.
Not a lot.
Uh,
Yeah. Excel can handle quite well.
so we originally they can't handle because Jason we flattened it for them, right? We flattened it for them. They actually tried to load it on Excel and the Excel crash. Okay, Excel crash. Excel
Nothing
crash
wrong
of
with
the
that. Nothing wrong with Excel, not enough RAM in the machine.
Mm.
correct because those guys. But then you're talking about the normal people, not the data science people that don't have like 8 GB of RAM at that time, right?
Just last
So,
week, I tried to do a pivot table on a data set on my 128 gigabyte laptop.
yeah,
128 gigabytes of RAM, mind you,
yeah,
and
It's still
it
not
crashed.
enough.
correct,
Still not
correct,
enough.
man. Oh, which is why actually one of the big news I should talk about is Pandas 2.0, which I forgot about actually.
Mm.
Pandas
But
2.0.
but isn't that a good case of fail early? instead of like waiting forever and then after like 2 days of crunching, then you have your data. It's just going to fail early, or you
Uh,
don't have enough memory to actually get this done in a reasonable amount of time.
yes. Oh no. It's only true if you have you work in a data science team, then they will know that okay, we need more resource and all that. If you work with an organization that is very new to that, as if the case when Sina project have the data set, that is very different time. When news office don't have a data team for the first place, so when they have no concept of doing data on a modest size of RAM, that's another story. It's it's the cargo cult that build the shape of the plane, but do not understand that for a plane for engine to work, you also need combustion and all the little thing and aerodynamic for things to work. So that error is equivalent to the cargo cult people. Uh, Fail early is only work when you have a team that willing to know the other approach. You need a reasonably technical team to understand that. So that's the difference here. Okay, so Pandas actually had an update. They actually the big one is they promise to be more performance, and that's about it really.
Okay.
They use more performance library. Of course, there is a lot of stuff like so there's Arrow. Arrow is a high performance date library.
And
Uh,
what are these? So I've always seen like libraries becoming faster. Like what are they actually making more
ah,
efficient use of? Is it like new chipsets because like all of the instruction sets in the Intel architecture, right? Are they making use of that? Are they
yes,
just like making use like just killing away inefficient code because there's like a more
yes.
microsecond faster implementation?
It's yes for everything. So, for
Mm,
example, one of the trend is writing libraries in C or C, no C++ mostly. It's not uncommon in the world of scientific computing. Okay, in the world of
mm,
scientific computing, that is already happened. This is the reason why uh, data set in the deep learning world, NumPy and SciPy is good enough because otherwise it'll be impossibly slow because they have C++
yeah,
component. That is one.
because
The second
you
one
can't
is on
really
top of
get away. You can't really get away from not writing C++ in those kinds of situations
correct,
because
correct.
doing
So
interpreted is going to take a long time.
correct. So that is given already, right? So that's given. The second thing is they also optimize. They also using modern architecture. So there's micro optimization as well.
Mm,
So, for example, they organize the data for modern hardware. So they're taking advantage of modern hardware on top of just C++, not many things. So a lot of things are faster because they're taking advantage of hardware on top of a lower level language. Do you understand that? Then
mm,
from there, they optimize more. They take away things they do not need anymore and whatnot. And sometimes they make the decision because some of the thing they need is needed in the early 2000s, and they decide that okay, we do not need this anymore, right?
mm,
So all this faster is a mix of everything: hardware capabilities, lower level language, and algorithm and optimization, cutting off all unneeded code, for example. So
mm.
so in short, yes, Tristan, it's all the thing that you actually say. So any question? Any other thing?
No, no.
So yeah, using better libraries and all that. Because like or not, even though in practice you use pandas as a prototyping system,
Mhm.
you still need to work fast enough because even though you got better and better hardware, the data only getting more and more. All right, because especially if you do it naively. If you do it naively, then you just stuff a lot more garbage, and then you still need the resource to filter through all the garbage. You can't
Mhm.
avoid that. So yeah, that's one.
What
Anything
is
to
this
add
on
on
this?
this? Uh-huh.
No,
Go
not
on.
really. But I was just interested what's on your screen because it says uncurled. It's like
So
curled.
after this, so after talking about this is a not topic. This is actually a book uh, by the maintainer of curl
Mm,
that put everything on GitHub. As you can see, it's open source. The book itself is open source. So uncurl, everything I know, I learned about running maintain an open source project. It's by Daniel Stenberg. So it's about his experience in maintaining open source code. In this
Does
case,
he
curl.
talk about why he named it curl? Like, is
I
it
don't
like
know.
a crawl but curl?
I don't know.
Okay, so
Uh,
anyway, I'll take a look at it later.
yeah,
Do
I
you know,
do not
Sean,
know, but
why is it called curl? Like, is it like crawl URL? No, I don't know.
I'm guessing CURL lah, because curl is C. It's
yeah,
written in C. It's purely written.
yeah, it's just
Mm.
correct. So yeah, a lot of things that we know about, but I want this book should be read. So people that that know open source should read this book. You can get it on
It's,
our website.
it's
Yes,
his experience of running a tankless project that the whole
correct,
world depends on lah, basically.
correct,
Mhm.
correct. So yeah, so there's that. Interesting book. I recommend it. Then finally, Godot 4.0, GitLab. This is the last two is more interesting. Let's
Yeah.
start with
Well,
this one.
Godot, I've liked Godot, but I haven't
Uh-huh.
had the time to actually program on it, so I don't know.
Correct. I like the idea in a way that I want to make game. I like the idea of making game. I do not know how to make it because as it turns out that making game is really not just programming. It's also art. It's also stories. It's also thinking about levels and all that. It's world building. On the other hand, you already can. It's world in a way that you are the GM, except you have to decide on the artwork, decide on the limitation,
Well,
and you have to
there are
design your
many
world.
assets available everywhere for placeholder. So
Correct. Correct.
that allows you. It's like a lean startup thing, right? It's a
Correct.
lean
Correct.
game, so you have a lot of placeholders. You just want to flesh out your story, play test
Correct.
it, and then once you actually have something working, then you invest on the assets.
Correct. So in this case, you also even despite that, you still had to design your level, so to say, right? Then adapt your asset into your level that you design is another story, right?
Mhm.
So the asset may not 100% fit your need to feed it somehow, for
Mhm.
example. So it's not free. It's easier. It's getting easier in a way that the community is very generous. But it also means that they help you take the hard part, and there's still hard part you still have to do. So level design and all that, those are still things that you have to do. So it's
Yeah,
not
sounds like an ORM. I think you can do
yes,
your
precisely,
difficult parts, but still you
precisely
still need to know what to do.
correct. In this case, for
But
example, you want to
actually,
talk
not
about
just an
ORM, right?
ORM. Sounds like a lot of the tools, like
Correct. Web
any
development
tool.
have that.
Yeah.
Web development have that. API have that. Maintaining your cloud infrastructure have that. So the cloud infrastructure gives you another tools now, like
Yeah.
routing and all that. You still have to think about your routing,
Yeah.
your
Just because you have the
multi-layer.
tool doesn't mean that you can skip on not learning how to use it, or at least learning the
Correct. Correct.
domain on which the tool is useful.
Correct. So you still have to think about replication, multi-domain, and all that. So it's not free. It's just easier for you, but easier in a different way. You still had a lot of hard work you need to do. The only difference is the equivalent is you don't have to write assembly code to get something up anymore.
Yeah, things
But
are
unfortunately,
easier
you still have
because
to
of the
write
tool,
program.
right?
Yeah, you don't have to deal
Things
with
are
that, but
easier.
things are still hard. Things are still not trivial, at
Well,
least.
it does
That's the
shift
main thing.
the difficulty from like how do I do like the tedium of doing it into
Yeah,
right the general like how do I approach this. So it
correct,
shifts the difficulty, which is why we have progress as humankind, right? Like, because we're now
correct.
thinking of things. We don't think of how do we get running water, because that's
Yep.
there. It's different sets of problems. Hopefully more
Yeah,
difficult.
and there is some extra thing here. So, for example, because you do not need to worry about water anymore, the
Mhm.
architects actually are actually wasting local water. So every time water is actually bursting out, those are fresh water, but except people just drain it off to the sea because now you're wasting water. Progress.
Or we put fountains all over the place and water
Yeah,
walls.
right. Correct. Then you realize that some people that actually have fountains and with pools are some of the driest region on the planet. It's so ridiculous. Okay. Yes, it's progress, but sometimes we forget about the cost of progress. So that's that. So let's move on to this because it
Speaking
turns
of
out,
cost, right? Speaking of
yeah.
cost, we moved out
Okay.
from GitLab because of this.
Oh, really?
Wow.
Yeah. Well, because we're not really
Interesting.
using a lot of
Ah,
the
Mm. The
stuff
premium
there.
feature. Mm.
Yeah.
correct.
We most of the time we do most of the deployment, the infrastructure. We don't need a lot of their
Mm-hmm.
infrastructure. We do it ourselves. We
Correct.
do manual
Correct.
deployments, if you would believe
Yep.
that, because
Mm.
it's cheaper. Because
Mm.
Yeah.
for if your client is a startup, they want to save as much money as they can.
Mm.
And
Yeah.
yeah, this is the problem.
Yeah. Correct. It's more controller. So I want to go to the next one instead. ChatGPT and API. So now you can interesting because now you can integrate this with the application.
Yeah, so I have an issue with them calling it free dot open source because it reads like free and open source, which is like your GPL or whatever, right? Or MIT license. But
Uh-huh.
this requires you to connect to have an API token to Whisper. So it's not actually doing the translation for you, and that's a
Yeah.
technology. This is you have a free and open source um, software to connect to a
Correct.
different software that actually does the heavy work. So I
Correct.
feel that was a bit misleading.
Uh, yeah, it's a bit
Of,
misleading.
it's kind of like the
Yeah.
binary block drivers in Linux.
Mm,
Yeah, correct. Because what happened then is what they promised from this is there's paper to describe the step. Whisper is more enough to run on your computer. I look at the model; it is runnable. There is paper that allow you to train it from scratch, but in practice, to use the whole thing, you need to use the infrastructure because your computer are not. Whisper can, but Whisper and Chat GPT together, you need to use their infrastructure because ChatGPT is using GPT-3. GPT-3 is very big. It's not practical to run on your own computer for the first place.
mm.
You have to use the infrastructure. As a result, you have to pay for that. So
So that
yeah,
them saying it's free dot open source is technically
yeah,
correct, which is the difficult kind of correct. Like yes,
correct,
you're
correct,
technically correct. So it's yeah, it just gives leaves a bad taste in your mouth. If you see like
correct.
so because you have like Whisper, you share that link right, Whisper.ai, and they
Yeah,
put it front and center. We're free, and then dot open source dot.
correct.
So
Where is it?
They'll never
Whisper.ai.
they'll never give it away, man.
Correct.
yeah,
This is the
This
cash cow, man. Seriously,
yeah. This is the thing
and
that will kill Google, So why would they ever give it
correct.
away?
Well, I don't think they're going to kill Google because there's argument that chat-based interface are not the user experience you want. Actually, it's still too early to say, to be honest. It's still very early to
yeah,
say.
We
yeah.
don't know what applications are gonna come out of this.
Mhm. I mean the
So,
like having a chat interface for a search engine, I feel it's not going to work for me because I
yeah,
want to scan a lot of the search results and I want to decide which one is important. But having a chat
correct.
means something else is deciding this is important, and I don't just want to believe that. But
Uh,
that's just me, right? Some people would
correct,
prefer just to be told the correct answer first and
correct,
foremost. And this
correct.
seems to be like the remember when Google had that second button where it
Yeah,
says I'm feeling lucky. I think this
yeah,
is the thing. This is similar to that, where we're confident enough in our search algorithm that the first result is the one that you want. I never
correct.
really. I mean, I try it, but it never really clicked for me, which is why Google also.
So, in my undergrad days, this is okay. This is bad. Okay, it's a good thing that we're not monetizing. In my undergrad days, days like 2004 to 2008, this thing is AI grad student wet dream, so to say, because people are talking about building chat system and all that. And the reason is this only makes sense for a chat system. This only makes sense when you try to build a HAL 9000, right? Or you have a robot that
But
talk to the
so that's the thing, right? A HAL 9000. If you're going to, well, there's a reason why in the cockpit of an airplane
yeah,
has so many buttons and so many controls,
correct,
because you want that kind of manual control
correct,
on a person. You're not going to say
yes,
that oh, please, like elevate the pressure on this particular touch or
Correct.
whatever,
You're not going to
then
do
you
that. It's
just
too
leave
slow.
it to the AI.
Yeah, it's too slow for. So in the case of hand sanitizer, they actually do the living thing, as you manage your
Mm.
living space with food and all that. Those are actions, simple actions.
Mm.
But the search result, I'm not convinced yet. But who knows, right? But this is also interesting because I have strong use case. In this case, I do not agree with people used to spam with content generation, but there is certain kind of thing that is very useful. So, for example, you try to build a help system with existing data set. This might be useful, right? Provided that
Mm.
the answer is predictable.
Yeah,
The
so
answer is
my
really
problem
predictable.
with help systems, and which is why I prefer searching it through myself, is because
Yeah,
chat systems, there is a certain expectation that they have the authority or the possibility of doing something for you. Like they can
correct,
refund something or they can make a decision, right?
correct.
If I'm just reaching for information like what happened to my refund or something, I'm fine
Yeah,
with like clicking on things and reading through it. But if I'm talking to something to a chat window, I have the
yeah,
expectation that they will do a decision. I'm not going to
correct.
use a chat system just to get information.
No,
That is
if
the
one
difference
is too
with AI.
unpredictable, more realistically, you would use this to generate a fact from your internal help document, right? In theory, in practice, I do not know how it works.
Yeah.
So the reason why I say generating of facts is more useful because you want something static at the end so that human can change it, adapt to it. Otherwise, you have a system that you need people to keep watching all the time, right?
Mm.
But
Uh,
even if it generates the FAQ, you still need to verify every single thing that it generates because it
correct.
could be
That's
all
the point.
completely wrong.
Correct. That's the point. And it only makes sense because once you generate the fact document, it's static now. Human can check. That's the only because only then you have the real control, right? Because sometimes you're not careful, the chat system will go off rail with the wrong information. It's bad for you actually because there's no
Yeah.
guarantee.
It's not just about like the AI. It's not about the AI. It's about um, even if you have an intern do this for you, you
Yeah,
still need to check, right? Even if it's an
correct,
AI. This is mostly because you're delegating a task to some other
correct,
entity. It could be an AI, it
correct,
could be an intern that
correct,
might
correct,
not be the expert at this thing, or might not be
correct.
the domain expert, and so that's why you have to check. You still have to check whether it's
Yes.
an AI or it's an intern.
So either way, with this, you get there's an API, there is a payment system. The premium model is available to us now. It used to be not available to us in Malaysia. Now it's available now, so you can pay for premium. You get the API to get it for
And
real.
you get to pay VAT as well, right? Maybe
Mm-hmm,
that's why it got delayed because they have to get the
mm-hmm.
accounting for VAT.
And here's one thing I really want to do. This is a bit ridiculous, but hear me out. Because this is an API thing.
Mm.
Your nowadays you have small computers, your ESP. Okay, maybe ESP might not work because it's a very fat payload. Maybe a Raspberry Pi and all that. So maybe I can make a robot that talk. In this case,
Mhm.
correctness is not an issue. Correctness is not important. Uh, Attempting to simulate a personality is.
Mhm.
So maybe that is an interesting use case. It'll be expensive. It'll be expensive, right? But nowadays, small size system can talk to Wi-Fi now. Put a few server, maybe have robot that can talk back to you,
Mhm.
right?
And fall in love with you.
Okay, okay. It's Eliza all over again. Okay, it's Eliza all over again because people thought that
Well,
Eliza
I'm
actually follow
sure
me.
there will be like future services where they ask for like the journals and diaries of your deceased loved one, and they will attempt to
It already
replicate some
happened. There is
information.
people that try to do that right now.
Well, yeah, but
I
it
mean, it's
wasn't
a
so
companies.
successful. But
Correct,
now
correct,
with this kind of like crawling and neural engine type of
yeah,
connections, it might be more successful.
correct.
Yeah.
So
Oh, you have the last tab about the engineer bringing down Twitter.
okay, this is more important really, but it will answer as a run like kids nowadays.
What was the problem?
So the TLDR is this is
Continue reading. Just continue. Yeah.
yeah really. Twitter is down. Platform blah blah blah. The TLDR is Elon Musk cut the cost now one back configuration break Twitter API.
I don't. Well, I
So
don't know about the bad the cut the cost. I mean, as a
yeah,
CEO, you are supposed to manage the costs. I
correct.
think this is again we've talked about it. A lot of the hires from before, even before Musk, were
Mm-hmm.
mostly probably bad hires, which is why
Yeah,
Musk is like kicking them all away. It's just that
yeah,
now it's being felt because you don't have uh, the numerous shields in place, numerous
yeah,
people to do it. So it's been being very inefficient, and like the fact that a single person can take it down means that something went wrong in the whole design of it.
yeah.
Like
It
for
is.
example, Netflix was trying to make sure that their systems don't go down
Correct.
just because of a single misconfiguration. That's the point of their design, right?
Mm-mm. So it happens because I can see why. Because when you when you build a product with the goal of pushing features, feature factories to attract users, reliability is often not the first thing. And I understand that. I understand that there's consequences. You need somebody with the consequences, ready for the consequences. That consequences can be people, can be more hand, can be you need more hand to maintain things inefficiently. It can be you shut down certain features. So there's no good answer for that. That's fine. Uh, but sometimes when you if if certain features are so brittle and need more people to do things, maybe the solution is be careful about the hiring that because yes, maybe it's really inefficient that you hire more people to do things. Uh, yeah, maybe need to be a bit more careful and thinking more
Mhm.
about hiring, right? There's no good answer for that. There's no right and wrong either
Yeah, I
because
mean these
often you do not
articles
get
are mostly
yeah,
like you're seeing the one side most of the
yes,
time. Like you're seeing, okay, yeah, that's this like the favorite quote here. This is what happens when you fire 90% of the workforce. But the even with 10% with very reduced capabilities, it still should continue. You don't you're going concerned like you don't like a big system like this goes on momentum. It does not trip down just because shouldn't trip down just because one person made a configuration change.
should not versus
Yeah, that's the
both
thing.
is very different,
Which is
right?
why that's why this is a single like a one side, because if that giant does trip down, then something was wrong in its initial inception. Like that there was
Yeah,
a
but often
critical flaw that was already there. It was not because
yes,
Musk took over and fired 90%. That flaw was already there. It's just that it's being shown now. That's
yes,
that's what these
and
articles are not saying.
There was probably
yeah,
someone like manually restarting certain
mm,
services, pressing a few
Mm,
buttons just to keep things going, and now
correct.
they're gone.
yeah.
Or
So
more likely somebody in between that says that okay, if you do this, there is consequences because you have the whole team and you have everyone talk to each other. So when certain operations is being done, there's a meeting. This is what happened in the startups properly, a proper one. When somebody said, I want this feature, then you have the engineering team come in and say, okay, can we do this? What's the consequence,
Yeah.
right?
So here's the thing,
More,
right? In
yeah.
in Twitter right now does not have the bandwidth to do new features. It's already full, uh, full
Ah,
in like trying to get things continuously running. That's the thing. You're not making new features. You're just getting things to
uh,
continue.
correct. But in this case, what we do not know is whether there at this attempt to remove, clean up, make
Mm.
operation easier despite of the features. So when you do have that kind of uh, task sprint, for example, what to say, to attempt to simplify these operations. That's a feature, because your feature to remove or reduce that dependency, right? Those are features. And though when you do this kind of thing, because admit it, you don't have the hand, you need to simplify your system. So that is a feature now, and that is a whole different operation on a very complex system that a lot of the original people is not there anymore. So as a result, it will happen. The bigger the company, the bigger the organizations, the more complex, the more type of system you have, the more complex it is. It is what it is. Really reliable, not necessarily, which is why your bank always crash sometime, right? Which is why your government system. I know those things are very badly maintained. I know that. I used to work in a government contractor. It's probably a few guys that is getting hired to just restart servers and all that, right? But complex is the big. If you like Twitter, the whole thing, the whole product is a software project of its own. Things only get complex more all the time. Maybe making it like only 10% of people can run it is not the priority for the first place. Who knows, right?
Yeah.
Who knows?
Yeah, the point
Maybe
just is that
yeah,
the point is just that for these types of articles, make sure that you get both sides, because
correct.
this makes it like the firing to be the sole cause, but that's not the whole picture. Like, because
Yeah,
it feels like the converse is true, that if only Musk did not fire these 90% people, then there will be an outage. It's not. It doesn't work like that, right? It's just
yeah,
that it hastened the the process of like self implosion.
yes.
Yeah.
But either way, the
Slowly
way
cut. If he had slowly cut, like Swimmer was saying, he slowly cut, and while they're slowly cutting, they're automating or they're fixing, and
yeah.
then it would have had a lesser impact at the end of the day.
But think about that, right? If you fire all the people without preparation and all that, I think this is what's happening right now, right? People do not know anything. They try to make things work, then it happens. It
Yeah.
happens. If you have startup that have product that more than 5 years and people have changed job already, it happens. Yeah, things that nobody remember about. This happens at 90% of the time. This is why contractor have business. Okay. So admit it. This is why contractor have business, because people left. Who knows what the hell is happening down there? Okay lah, it's 11, and tomorrow is work day for me, which is actually it's a good thing because tomorrow is office day. So meaning I got to meet with the guys. So
Thanks for Sean
And-
for joining us and giving us
Yes.
some insights on these things.
correct.
Always enjoy these talks.
Yes. So with that said, next week I hope actually we'll be back. My teeth is getting better, so I should be able to talk more now.
Well, you're
So,
already
yeah.
like talking like 60% of the, and we're sharing check 20% of the airtime. So
Correct.
next
So with that
next week
said,
it's more than 80%. So we'll look
Correct.
for you. We'll be expecting that.
yeah. Then I'm trying to find some content along the way. I don't have a good one. So okay, thanks for listening. Goodbye. I'm gonna end the
Okay,
podcast
bye.
in 5. Bye.
See you.